Hey there everyone, it is Kevin here, and I wanted to make a video that goes along with the Supernatural Japan podcast. So in this video I'm going to be sharing a spooky story that's based in Osaka, Japan. I didn't want to make a video or post a video that's just a static graphic with the Supernatural Japan podcast, but something a little more kind of campfire-esque where I share a story. And today I'm going to share the story of the Sennichi Department Store fire, which is episode 1 of the Supernatural Japan podcast. And it is the worst building fire to ever happen in Japan post-war. And it was a disaster that happened in 1972 in the Namba district of Osaka. So here we go. So for those who may have never had the chance to visit Japan yet, Osaka is the second biggest city in Japan. It's often known as Japan's second city. Most people, when they think of Japan, they think of Tokyo, but the kind of golden route for travelers includes Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, that kind of area. So it is a very popular place to go to, and now that we live in a post-COVID world, tourism is booming in Osaka, and it is again a very busy place. Now it is part of the Kansai region of Japan, and is often known as the greatest foodie destination in Japan. If you love food, that's where you want to go for your takoyaki, your okonomiyaki. And it's also known as the funniest city in Japan. It's a city that's gritty, it's tough, and the people have a great sense of humor. And often professional comedians from around Japan, when they want to kind of cut their teeth and learn the craft of comedy, they first have to go to Osaka and put in their dues there. So this story takes place in 1972. But we're gonna go back a little bit earlier than that. So the land where the Senichi Department Store was located on in Namba, not far from Shinsaibashi, close to Denden Town in Osaka, has a bit of a dark history. During the kind of samurai wars era, there were some battles fought there, a lot of people died, and it was also, that area was an execution ground as well. So as you know, if you like spooky things and supernatural paranormal stories, any area that had some kind of major battle with a lot of people dying in a violent way and also was an execution ground is definitely gonna have some bad juju. So to start with, this area of Osaka has that bad juju. Now let's move forward a little bit. In 1938, in that part of Osaka, and the site of the Senichi Department Store, a large kabuki theater was built, and it was the largest in the city. It could seat over 3,000 people, and that was just before World War II. And kabuki theater was very popular, but post World War II, kabuki theater saw a drop in popularity, so that theater was no longer needed. So in 1958, Senichi Department Store opened. Now the model originally for this department store was going to be almost like a shopping center where all these different independent stores and stalls would be rented out to different merchants, but it didn't work out so well. People didn't want to rent the spaces, and they decided to make it a department store style. So in 1958, the Senichi Department Store opened up, and it was a very popular department store in Osaka. And in the 1970s, it was a place where you could do a lot more than just go shopping. There were restaurants and cafes and coffee shops. The 3rd and 4th floors had clothing sections. There was for a while, there was an amusement park on the roof of the building. And on the top floor of the building, there was a nightclub called Playtown. Now, Playtown was one of the most popular nightclubs in Osaka. So the department store itself in 1972 was open from 10 a.m. till 9 p.m. But Playtown was open until 11. And again, it was on the 7th floor, and it was one of the most popular places for people to go and drink and party and have a great time in Osaka. But on May 13th, 1972, there would be disaster. Around 10:27 p.m., a fire broke out. And a lot of people suspect that the fire was either started from two reasons. Either someone, a construction worker that was doing renovations in the building, threw a cigarette butt and that caught fire, or there was faulty wiring. And people aren't really sure, but there were a lot of construction workers around doing renovation work. So the fire started very quickly, and within minutes, the third floor, fourth floor, fifth floor, all the way up to the seventh floor where the Playtown nightclub was engulfed in fire. Now, there was a series of disasters that happened at this point. First of all, when the nightclub started to fill with smoke, people started to panic. They soon realized that the emergency exits had been locked and they couldn't escape. The elevators weren't working and there was smoke billowing up through the escalators. So panic ensued, and people started, of course, freaking out, trying to escape, and several people died by being trampled. Then the really desperate people tried to jump, and several people jumped out of the building, and quite a few people died that way. And the vast majority of people died through smoke inhalation. When all was said and done, 118 people died in the Sennichi Department Store fire, and it was extremely tragic. And it was, at that point, the biggest building fire, and it still is the biggest building fire in Japan post-World War II. So emergency crews came. Soon it became a recovery operation. They did all they could. But again, in the end, 118 people succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning, being trampled, and sadly falling to their deaths as they tried to escape. So for 10 years, the Senichi Department Store building was unoccupied. It was a burnt shell of a building, and it sat there in Namba for 10 years. And in 1982, it was demolished, and a new building was built on the site called Printemps, which was a French department store. And during the 1980s, it was a very popular department store. This French department store was trying to expand globally, and that remained until 2001, when that shop, or that department store, closed. So in 2001, that became Bic Camera, which is a very famous chain of electronics shops throughout Japan. And even when it was occupied by the French department store, a lot of people who worked there said strange things happened. And during those years in the 1980s and 90s, there were a lot of staff members who said that they wore protective beads in order to keep themselves safe from some of the strange things that would happen. Now, one ghostly story has to do with a woman working at a gift wrapping counter in the department store, Printemps, saying that she heard a strange sound, and she heard a woman's voice yelling, "Fire, fire, fire." Maybe this is similar to the cries that were heard back in 1972. Other employees reported that when they would go to the basement area of the building on smoke breaks, whenever they would light a cigarette, they felt something push them, as if they were being pushed. And this is something a lot of people said that they contended with when they would be on their smoke breaks, the feeling that they were being pushed or shoved by someone who wasn't there. Now, maybe could this have had something to do with the fact that potentially that fire in 1972 was started by someone smoking cigarettes, and maybe some ghostly figures obviously didn't like that. There are reports of people seeing women dressed in kimonos in the female washrooms, and simply disappearing into the walls. There are also people that say when they're in the Shotengai, or the arcade, the shopping arcade outside of Bic Camera at night, they can hear thuds or a thudding sound as if something is hitting the ground. Could this possibly be the sounds of those poor people falling to their deaths back in 1972 as they jumped out of the building to try to save their lives? That's what some people suspect. Another very interesting and spooky tale has to do with the elevators. So, of course, the elevators had music, or elevator music, playing in them. And the building had to complain to the elevator music company that the music was scaring the elevator staff and people in the elevators, because they could hear the sound of people crying mixed in with the music. The tapes were sent to the company, who then analyzed them, and they didn't find a problem, and they sent new recordings to the department store. And when those new tapes were put in and played in the elevator, again, people in the elevators heard the sounds of people crying in the background of the music. Pretty disturbing. So a lot of very interesting and strange and ghostly things are reported to have happened over the years at the current Bic Camera site. Now, I myself just went to Bic Camera this past summer in 2023, there in Namba, I tend to stay in Osaka when I'm in Japan, since my wife is from Osaka. So, you know, I went into Bic Camera, I explored, I bought some nano blocks, which are kind of like Lego mini things. I spent a lot of time walking around in that area. It's a very interesting area. I was staying nearby, and I have to admit that I've only been there in the daytime. I'm going to show some footage here of me walking around. You can actually see it right now. It's gonna be right beside me. Some footage of me walking around Bic Camera, that area, the Shotengai, the covered arcade around there. And of course I'm there in the daytime. It's very crowded, very busy. Tourism is definitely back in Japan, in Osaka, with COVID being something in the past, the pandemic. So it's a very busy place. So of course, when I'm there, when I have been there, I haven't seen anything unusual, but so it's very interesting to go to this place knowing about the dark history. Now, of course, for more information about the Sennichi Department Store fires, for more detail, go listen to my episode of the Supernatural Japan podcast. The link is down below. Go subscribe to the podcast and listen to the audio version, where there's a lot more detail about the history of the building and more information about what happened in that very dark night, that very sad night, and potentially what may be happening all these years later in that very haunted part of Osaka, Japan. So go check out the Supernatural Japan podcast. The link is below. If you guys like this, let me know. Smash that like button, leave a comment letting me know if you'd like to hear more of these kind of campfire stories about the supernatural, the dark history of Japan. I've got many more episodes of the Supernatural Japan podcast that I've recorded, and I'm very happy to make this style of episode, or this style of video here on YouTube for you guys to enjoy. But remember, you can enjoy it even more when you go down below and you check out the Supernatural Japan podcast. There's a lot more details involved in those episodes, and I think you guys will definitely enjoy it. Again, I hope you enjoyed this. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and share it with people that you know and all of that stuff. And yeah, so that's it. Again, if you guys like this style of kind of campfire spooky story about Japan, let me know. I've got a lot more of these stories. And check the links below for the Supernatural Japan podcast and all my other social media stuff. And again, leave a comment if you'd like to see more of these, and I'm happy to make them. Yeah, so that's it, guys, for me, Kevin, coming to you from on a very beautiful, cool morning here. And I hope you're all doing well, and take care.